So as Vladimir Putin continues his all-out offensive in Ukraine, it kind of sort of feels like everything is spiraling and going to shit right now. So I figured I would give you guys a little bit of a glimmer of hope, and it is coming out of Russia, of all places, where average citizens have taken to the streets, basically in gigantic anti-war, widespread demonstrations across the country to oppose what Vladimir Putin is doing here. So I'm going to show you guys a bunch of videos that were lined up here by Alejandro Alvarez. So credit to him for putting together this thread, but I think it's really important to get this perspective and understand that there's a massive difference between the elites and the, in the case of Putin, a dictator who runs a country like Russia or any other country for that matter, versus the average citizens in these countries. Because, regardless of what actions may be taken by these leaders, the reality on the ground is when it comes to war, when it comes to massive conflicts like this, even when it comes to the consequences of sanctions that the US may levy against Russia, it is always going to be average citizens and working class people who are going to be the most affected by these things. So it's important to get an understanding of exactly how they feel on the ground, and as you're about to see here from these videos, they are not too happy with what Putin is doing. So let's just go ahead and jump in. They say, protests are erupting in several Russian cities tonight against Putin's large-scale invasion of Ukraine, along with attempts from police to forcibly suppress them. Here's his hometown of St. Petersburg. I'll be threading videos below as I find them. So here's the first one. So you can see there are a significant amount of people. What they're chanting there is no war or no war with Ukraine. Another example here of people being arrested. So we have more videos coming out directly from Moscow. So again, they were chanting no war with Ukraine, but more videos coming out here. I mean, just giving more of a perspective just how just gigantic these crowds are in forming, especially in St. Petersburg and Moscow. So you can see there are obviously people being taken out of the crowd and arrested. Many of them have been arrested. We're going to get to some of the preliminary figures of how many people have been arrested so far. But, I mean, it takes a bunch of balls. I mean, it takes really a gigantic set of balls to go out there, put your life on the line, put your freedom on the line with a repressive government like Vladimir Putin's government, who knows what these protesters are going to face as a consequence of coming and speaking out against his actions. But, all credit to them. Again, takes absolutely massive balls to go out and do this. But, again, they're doing widespread arrests as well. We have more coming out of different places within Russia. So again, chanting no to war. So all over, multiple different cities, again, here from Moscow. And I mean, this one really puts it in perspective from St. Petersburg. I mean, we're talking about just hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of people who are already taking to the streets right now in Russia to protest Putin's actions. You got a guy walking around with a Ukrainian flag. That takes a lot of balls. You got people who are out here giving speeches and protesting this and speaking about it. And you have also more people getting arrested. So there's a little bit of a visual perspective in terms of what's happening on the ground. Again, massive credit and solidarity with these protesters. It takes a lot to be able to be willing to go out there and speak against what Putin is doing here. But to get more specifics on some of the figures and also some direct quotes, they say thousands join anti-war protests in Russia after Ukraine invasion, here from The Guardian. They say police have made at least 1,346 arrests as of Thursday evening, according to the OVD Info Monitor, as they crack down on unsanctioned protests. Most of the arrests were made in Moscow and St. Petersburg, where the crowds were the largest. They chanted no to war as they exchanged shocked reactions to the attack on Ukraine. They say in Moscow, Alexander Belov said he thought Putin had lost his mind and said, quote, "I thought that we would never see a war like this in the 21st 21st century, he said, who arrived early at Moscow's, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that square, to find surrounded by police fans. It turns out we live in the Middle Ages. They say the mood in Moscow was dark and somber hours after Putin had announced that he was launching a broad military offensive in Ukraine. And we got another quote here saying, "I am embarrassed for my country. To be honest with you, I am speechless. War is always scary. We don't want this," said Nikita Golubev, a 30-year-old teacher. Why are we doing this? So again, it's important to get like direct opinions from actual average Russian civilians, because their views on this entire situation are very different from Putin's views on this entire situation. And honestly, Putin's views have been pretty much different than anybody else. It seems like even members within his own, government and oligarchs as well, who funnel money to him and who are massively corrupt alongside him within the government, that even some of these other oligarchs and some of these government officials are like, what the fuck are you doing right now? I mean, it doesn't even make, a strategic sense what he's doing right now, because with the sanctions we're about to levy against Russia, especially with the new ones that Biden is coming out with today that I'll do an entire another video on, but especially with the sanctions that we're about to completely drop on top of Russia's head, on top of Putin's head, it's like, what is the actual strategy here? What is your end goal in this entire situation? And average people in Russia, they see this and they're like, yeah, we don't want this. We don't want to go to war. We don't want to lose, average, random people who are in the Russian military's lives. Just like here in the United States, we don't want, average random dudes from, West Virginia being sent over to Iraq to go and die for oil. Same is true for Russian civilians. They don't want, to go be a part of this imperial project that Putin is trying to put together here to, rebuild the ancient Russian Empire or something like that. They don't want this. And just to give you a perspective in terms of how much they don't want it, we don't have any exact polling that's come out in the last day. I mean, literally the invasion basically started last night, so obviously we're not going to have polling data yet on the specifics of how Russians are feeling, but this is a good, barometer basically to give us an idea. They say a fresh poll by the independent Levada Center released on Thursday showed that only 45% of Russians stood in favor of the recognition move that preceded Thursday morning's dramatic events. So 45% favored the recognition move. So if you guys remember how this all unfolded, right? Putin was basically acknowledging the existence of the LPR and DNR, these eastern portions of the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine. He said, I recognize these as independent states or independent territories, and therefore I'm going to use that as an excuse to send my troops into those regions to, protect the ethnic Russians there, right? He called them peacekeeping troops. Now we see, obviously, they are nowhere close to being, peacekeeping troops or anything like that. But the point is, if only 45% of Russians were in favor of that, I mean, think about how tiny a minority of them would be in favor of a full-scale invasion of the entire country of Ukraine, okay? I would guess it's, less than 20% roughly, okay? Because 45% in favor of just recognizing heavily ethnic Russian populations that are way significantly to the east of what we're talking about here. I mean, we've been seeing an all-out invasion of the entire country of Ukraine. They've been bombing all the way to the west, damn near the borders of Poland. They've been bombing Kiev. They took over the Chernobyl site. So it's like they're literally doing a full-scale, all-out invasion right now. And the Russian people, I mean, you can see from some of the quotes there, you can see from the people who are putting their lives on the line, heading out into the streets, that average Russian civilians do not want this war, okay? This is Vladimir Putin's war. And that's, again, an extremely important distinction to make here, because that reflects on what we should be doing right now as the international community, if you want to call it that, or as the United States specifically, in the country that I live in. I do not support any sanctions that are going to hurt innocent Russian civilians, because it's not their fault. And at the end of the day, the reality of the situation is that, you're going to have to respond in some way to what Putin is doing, sanction the oligarchs, maybe sanction Vladimir Putin individually, sanction, certain sectors of their economy, but don't do insane widespread sanctions that are only going to fall on innocent Russian civilians. Because again, reminder, this is what we've seen in plenty of other countries. We've seen this in Iran, we've seen this in Venezuela, we've seen this in plenty of other countries, where if the US steps in and we start to slap these countries with sanctions, it doesn't end up removing the leaders from power necessarily. That's nowhere close to being a guarantee. It doesn't even necessarily end up affecting the elites within these societies the most. What it's going to do is it's going to hurt and potentially starve innocent civilians. So we want to walk that fine line there of trying to hold Russia accountable while not affecting innocent civilians, and understanding that innocent people in Russia, they do not want this war. They do not support Putin. And there's a very clear distinction here between what Vladimir Putin is doing and what he wants versus what average, working class civilians within Russia want.